Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. Post Notre Dame edition, post regular season edition, pre signing day edition. We have all kinds of stuff going on. We have the usual crew here: Eric McKinney, Mark Culkin, and your humble host, Chris Arledge. Okay, guys, I don't want to talk about it. I don't like talking about it, but we're going to have to talk about the Notre Dame game a little bit. So let's start with this. Let's just start with the overall impressions, and then we'll get into some more specifics on offense, defense, maybe even a little bit of special teams. So, who wants to start? Mark looks anxious. Mark, give us your big picture impressions of the latest loss to Notre Dame.
They played hard. They didn't quit. And, that's a great thing to have about your team. But when that's the best thing you can say about them after the season, I mean, coming in second place 6 times, that's who this team is. Bottom line, they make some great plays. They don't make enough great plays. They don't have a lot of talent, but they have some talented players. And it's where they don't take that extra step. Those great players don't come together to have great games. We've talked about the wide receivers all year long and how they've, again, you see some great stuff, but then when it's time to step up, it doesn't happen. Against Notre Dame, they were torching the #1 pass defense in the country, and especially in the fourth quarter when they were making that comeback. But all of a sudden, you get a couple of pick sixes, and whether it's on the wide receivers or the quarterbacks, it doesn't matter. This is what the season's been for this team. Close but no cigar. The all-hand grenade team. Love to play horseshoes. It's just on defense, so much improvement. The fact that this team only gave up 21, 22 points per game this season, and it couldn't be matched up with a Lincoln Riley offense. It's just one of those perplexing seasons. Like you, Chris, you don't want to talk about it, but you had the chance to beat Notre Dame. This was the first game all year where they didn't have a lead in the fourth quarter, and it actually looked like they were coming back. They were going to be able to make that comeback, and the same result. Whether it was a turnover earlier in the game, late in the game, it was always something to keep this team from getting a flat tire, blowing a gasket, getting across the finish line before the other team.
Eric, big picture thoughts.
Well, I was shocked that USC hung in a game with a very good team, went punch for punch with them, and then threw a back-breaking second half interception. Hadn't seen it all year. Took
Nope.
us all by surprise. I mean that's kind of what we said going in, right? It was going to be tight, and this team, like you do, it's very frustrating, and I can't even imagine how frustrated Lincoln Riley and the players are about it. But he's not wrong when he talks about them being close. You are close. The issue I think for USC going forward is that the two things that you really want to be able to rely on in close games, you want to the line of scrimmage on both sides. You want to be able to lean on your big guys on both sides, and USC as a program isn't there yet. In in all of those losses, if you could just say, "Hey, big guys, go win it for us," I think it comes out differently. And the both groups played hard, and I think both groups you got a lot more out of them than maybe you expected going in. Like the offensive line against Michigan and a little bit against Penn State was okay. This is the worst case scenario of what we could see. But every other game, it was I think you got enough from. There were hiccups here and there, but in a for a team where you weren't getting the necessary lift from other places. It was very evident when the big guys couldn't just go win you the game that became difficult. So going forward, that's it. That's it. Offensive line, defensive line, get them to a point where you can have them in the conversation with the other playoff teams. And I think you're going to be fine. This year it was tough because you really needed what has always been said about USC, not always, but of late. Not great lines, but there's skill guys everywhere. That's how they're going to, play in the Big Ten. And the skill guys weren't impactful enough. They weren't impactful enough to lift any sort of deficiencies that you have on both lines based on kind of recruiting before Lincoln Riley got here and a little bit of his early recruiting as well on how he kind of built the team. But Mark mentioned it was look, if you could take all emotion out of it and just think about like how those games played out, they were in great games all year long. They're a team that was 6-6 because they made a play here and there and they absolutely missed. They missed on enough plays to make them 6-6.
Well, Eric, you're bringing up a point, and I want to come back to it because I didn't touch on it about you went in the trenches and especially with the offensive line. How many times this year did we talk about how well the offensive line run blocks? They're not doing enough of that, maybe to cross the finish line more than the other team first. So that comes back to, are you doing the best with what you have? They might be playing hard, but are you making them play harder than they need to because you're taking away what they do best?
Oh, I mean that conversation about the offense and how it looks and any changes you need to make there and going forward and all that. That's the offseason, right? The defense is hang on to as much of it as you can and just let those guys keep going, right? The step one on defense, you bring back every single coach and tell them run it again, second year in the system, all of that. Offense, you've got to make a ton of changes, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that, but it starts with what you're saying where the raw numbers, I don't think always tell the story. Runs, you have to run more than you pass. There's stuff that you can do and the way games play out, I don't think that's the exact thing, but it really did never felt like USC could run it every time they wanted to, and that's a skill thing. But it also felt like the defense never had to fully commit to stopping the run, and they could always sort of just catch USC when they sat back and said they'll throw it to us eventually. Eventually, they're going to throw it to us.
PJ Fleck said
And again, you don't need to run the ball 80% of the time to do that, but you need to create sort of a feel and a culture to say we are always a threat to run the ball at you. And I don't think that got done this year.
no, PJ Fleck called him out. I mean, that was the best coaching quote of the season as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, we should probably give some credit where credit is due on this one. Going into this game, my perspective was that Indy is a good football team with a really good running game and they're good defensively. But I didn't know how good they were because they had feasted on what was a terrible schedule. That's still true. They feasted on a terrible schedule. Their defense is ranked in the top 5 in just about everything. And it's a good defense. It's probably not a top 5 defense, right? It's a top 5 defense when you're playing the schedule they played, which is home games just about every week, service academies, weak ACC teams. What Notre Dame does really well is they run the football, and they're committed to running the football, right? They really want to run the football, and they have 2 outstanding backs. Riley Leonard is an excellent running quarterback. I don't know that he's a great quarterback, but he's an excellent running quarterback, and he can make enough throws to keep you honest. And that offensive line is big and physical, and they're committed to it. Notre Dame ran the ball 60-something% of the time. USC passed the ball 60-something% of the time, despite the fact that both teams averaged 7 yards per carry. Notre Dame's a good football team. And, the difference sometimes in games is that the better team has somebody step up and make a huge play. That happened here with the Notre Dame corner making a fantastic pick. I mean, gets his head around at the last second, catches a ball that's really not right at him. He had to reach for it. Somehow keeps his feet, runs it back for a touchdown, and essentially wins the game there. So those guys deserve some credit. They can do some things in the playoff. I don't think it's a good enough team to win the playoff. I don't think they have I don't think they have a dominant defense, and I think they're too one-dimensional on offense to do that. But they'll have a chance against anybody they play. So it's a good team. Once again, USC plays a good team and they play them well and fall short. And when it's the Irish, especially, you hate to see that, right? That's a bitter pill to swallow when you think USC is going to tie the game with under 4 minutes left and they throw a pick. The big problem, though, with USC season is not that they played close games against LSU, Penn State, and Notre Dame and lost 2 of the 3. The biggest problem with USC season is they played close games against teams that weren't any good and managed to lose a bunch of those. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. And to a large extent, it is clear where USC's deficiencies are. It's where we knew they were to start the season, right? We knew that USC didn't have a ton of top shelf talent up front defensively. We knew they were playing some very young guys and moving some guys around offensively. And we knew that if the season didn't go well, that's where you point the finger. And that's true. Although I think the defensive line probably outperformed their talent level. And the offensive line got better as the year went on. If I had to give a grade to the offensive units, I don't think I would grade the offensive line as the most underperforming unit on the team. I don't think I'd, in fact, I know I wouldn't. It'd be the wide receivers. The wide receivers may be better players man for man than the guys that were starting on the O-line, but they underperformed badly. And I think that gets us to one of the big issues with the Notre Dame game and also the season as a whole is that USC didn't get enough big plays. They don't rush the passer very well. They didn't get a lot of turnovers defensively. They didn't have guys who were breaking games wide open offensively, a guy who can go 80 yards at any time. They just didn't have that this year. And you need that because if every possession is a grind, then there are just too many things that can go wrong. You get a holding penalty, you get a 3-yard loss, now you're playing behind the chains. I mean, that stuff happens in football. You have to be able to get a 60-yard touchdown. And they really struggled to do that in a way that they hadn't in Lincoln Riley's first 2 years. And that's a problem. And it's a problem defensively when you can't make big plays because if you are sort of under-talented in your front seven with guys who play hard and who I'm really proud of, but that's what you have, then eventually you need something to go right against good teams. Otherwise, they're going to march the ball down the field. And USC just didn't get enough big plays. They got a couple. They got a couple against Notre Dame. They got a few during the season. But I think that was the biggest thing. And Notre Dame did.
Sorry, Chris, to throw numbers in there, they had 9 plays of 40 yards this year, 27 last year. And that's one more game, right, with the bowl game, but 20
So
I mean,
if we get 18 in the bowl game, we're right there.
Yeah.
No, this is a problem, right? Because sometimes you need to get something easy. And they just never got anything easy on offense. And if every touchdown drive is a 9-play drive or going to be a 9-play drive, then all it takes is one missed tackle or one missed block by a right tackle that causes a sack and now your drive's over, or a drop pass on 3rd and 3. All these things happen over the course of the year, so they just couldn't make big plays offensively or defensively. They played hard, and they were in it against everybody, but ultimately they're a 6-6 team for a reason. They just weren't all that good. And the Notre Dame game turned out exactly as you'd expect. It was competitive in the fourth quarter. You needed them to make a big play at the end to win it, but there's no reason at this point to expect this particular USC team to make a big play at the end to win a game. It's just not something they did. All right, let's focus a little bit more on the offense. I mean, look, guys, this is a game where Notre Dame was giving up, I think, 230 yards a game and 11 points a game. USC had about 560 yards. They scored 35 points. That's a pretty good performance against a very highly ranked defense. What are your thoughts on the Eric?
In that game, it was good. It was good. It wasn't great. And you had chances to sort of control the game, I think, a little bit more than you did. And there were two Maybe there was one big series that I think kind of showed this is what the USC offense is in this game and was all season, and it's after the interception, and they have the ball in plus territory, and they throw 7 yards on the first play, and you've got 2nd and 3, and you throw incomplete, incomplete, incomplete. Two of them downfield. One of them looked like Lake was open, right? And that's sort of the thing too, which I'll hit back on at the end. But you eventually the end result is 3 incompletions. You turn it over on downs. Notre Dame runs it, goes straight back down and scores a touchdown. And that's it. When you have a chance to just sit on it and say, we're imposing our will all the way down and run past whatever that is. Early on, there were those 3 games in a row where USC had those possessions, Michigan, and I know they ended up beating Wisconsin, but there was a period at that point where the offense got the ball with a chance to go score and stretch the lead and put it away. And then Minnesota was the same thing. The offense got the ball late, kind of mid fourth quarter in their own territory, went 3 and out and gave it back. And that is what the other team needed. And so that was kind of the thing here. It was different time in the game, different spot on the field, but when the offense really needed something, they didn't get it. And a lot of stuff what we saw in that one was like that third down pass to Lake McCree down the field where Jaden kind of has to throw it under pressure and it goes to an open guy but doesn't quite get there. And then on fourth down, he like sets it in Makai Lemon's hands downfield on what would be a really, really, really tough catch, but a great throw to put it exactly where it needed to be. And we saw that too much. Just, hey, we need you to go make this play. By the way, it's really difficult. It's a tough throw. It's in coverage, and you've got to make this catch. And Lincoln Riley after the game talked about like, hey, Jaden gave his guys chances to make plays. He gave his guys chances to make plays, and it's just like, is that the offense? The offense is punt it to somebody in coverage and hope that they make a play when we're 12 games into a season where that has worked like 20% of the time all year. And I think that was the biggest frustration is that you see some throws that are phenomenal throws that are not brought in. And there were some throws that weren't good. There were some catches that weren't made. But a lot of times it was like, that was going to be a really, really hard play to make. And that seemed like the play you were asking him to make. And after 2 years of, and there was a little bit of just Caleb Williams kind of running around anywhere, and the defense couldn't cover a guy for 9 seconds, and now you found him wide open, and that's going to happen. But for 2 years, we saw an offense where that guy is wide open. That guy's wide open, and he's schemed open, or he's just got the skill to get open, or the throw kind of pulls him open. But the number of plays this year where it seemed like the right play, and it's just throwing it to a guy that's got a 5% chance to catch it. Again, is that the wide receivers not being able to get to a point where they need to get to? Is that a quarterback making the wrong read? Is that just a design where the opponent is sitting there going, yeah, we know exactly where your guys are going, and we're jumping in and we're beating them? Or is it just asking them to make plays that they can't make? The back shoulder stuff, those kinds of throws just became so low percentage this year, and you went to them over and over and over and over. And I think the one game that really jumps out is the Nebraska run game, where you saw a bunch of different wrinkles kind of throughout, and it seemed like it really worked, and then put it away on the shelf. Didn't really see any of that stuff the next 2 games. So there was a lot of sort of just kind of questionable stuff about what you asked the guys to do. Were they talented enough to do it? And why sort of keep going at the same stuff when we saw the same results in 12 games pretty much?
Yeah, the USC's had a lot of receivers that made 50-50 balls, 70-30 or 80-20 in USC's favor over the years. years, right? You remember the Matt Fink just chucking the ball up in the air to Michael Pittman, who would come down with it over and over and over again. Drake London was fantastic at that. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy. You throw it in his space, he's going to bring it in. And USC's receivers made some 50-50 catches this year. They made some amazing catches this year. But it wasn't 50-50 anymore. It was 20-80 the other way. And it seems like the entire offense at times was based on, well, let's just see if those guys can make 50-50 catches. And I think Notre Dame coming into this game decided we're going to take away the short pass. We're going to take away the intermediate routes. We are going to force USC to throw those low percentage passes downfield because they haven't been able to do it all year. And USC did a lot more of that in this game than I think Notre Dame expected them to. But ultimately, Notre Dame was right that if you make USC beat you by consistently hitting those plays downfield, they can't do it. It took until, just under 4 minutes in the fourth quarter for the game to be decided that way. But ultimately, Marcus Freeman was right. That's not what USC is able to do consistently enough. Mark, thoughts on the O against the Irish, or even big picture?
Look, I've said it before, when you need a layup, stop shooting 3-pointers from 5 feet behind the arc. And that's, I think what both of you guys were talking about there with USC's offense. Eric, you brought up the Nebraska game. I'll bring up a better scenario, and it was the game before Notre Dame, UCLA. You got 3 opportunities with first and goal from the 5, from the 4, from the 3, and your run pass ratio is 3-6. That's all. That's all you need to say. I said it earlier. This offense makes it harder on itself than it needs to be. You have certain situations that you brought up, that Chris brought up, and you're making it more difficult on yourself. You're throwing the 50-50 balls. Chris, we talked about this on my show yesterday. If the play call, if you're going to call the back shoulder fade deep down the sideline, do you want to do that with your 6'2" guy who knows how to make the difficult catch? Or do you want to have one of your 6'4" to 6'6" guys who can athletic the one-on-one coverage? So is it the right play call if you're not using the right personnel? It's that type of stuff. If your strength on offense is running the ball and you've got first and goal from the 5, the 4, the 3, commit to the run.
Yeah, the difference between a running team and a team that runs the ball sometimes is that a running team doesn't get dissuaded by a 1-yard gain on 1st and 10. They don't. You go back and watch. You go back and watch the old McKay teams. You watch Pete Carroll's teams with Reggie and Lindell. You watch Nebraska '95. Whoever it is, you watch those teams, and if they gain a yard on 1st down and it's 2nd and 9, they do not run away from the running game at that point. They don't. And there's no reason you have to. What you can't have in the running game is losses, but you can get 2-yard gains. It's okay. A team is committed to running the ball, continues to run the ball in that situation. Lincoln Riley does not. He doesn't. If it's a 2nd and 9, it's 2 or 3 passes coming right now. And you have 1st and goal at the 4 and you lose a yard on the first play, we're throwing fades now. I mean, that's just what he does this year. And that's a problem because you can't establish the run if you insist that every run play be a 6-yard gain.
Even 8-yard gains don't work for us. I mean, unfortunately, Woody Marks left the game early with an injury, but they still ran the ball incredibly well with Quentin Joyner and when Brian Jackson got his, few opportunities.
Yeah.
You gotta lean into it, man. You just got to.
I think there were like a handful of times this year that I can remember being surprised by a run call where I thought absolutely a pass. And it was the second half of Washington where you ran on a couple like 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s when you really got that thing going. Yeah. And it felt unstoppable until you got into the red zone late. And then you got, like we said, you got one run stuffed and then kind of got worried about that and started thinking about some other things. And you throw on second and then you have like a kind of a weird pitch thing that we haven't seen really at all this year. But that was, I mean, in 12 games, there was one one sort of instance. I don't remember every single play, but one sort of set of quarter or a few drives where it felt like, man, they are going to run the ball no matter what, and they're getting it done. And it was that second half of Washington. I think like four opposing coaches in a row after that game, or I guess three after that game, they all talked about they all sort of made mention of, yeah, they ran they ran it well. They really did a good job there in the run game.
They had the winning score against LSU, I'd put in that category too, right? That's not a play I expect them to run the ball on. And in fact, after the LSU game, I thought they didn't run the ball particularly well in this game, but LSU probably has some athletes up front, but they stuck with it, right? They kept running even though they didn't have much success, which makes it all the more strange where in games that were having a lot of success, they would refuse to run. The other problem they had is Lincoln Riley likes to throw those quick passes behind the line of scrimmage as an extension of the run game. And what those did this year is got you second 12, second 13 over and over and over again. Part of it was the wide receivers not blocking particularly well. The other part of it was, though, that sometimes on those plays, your receiver has to make somebody miss. I didn't make anybody miss. I mean, almost never. You remember when Mike Williams was getting those bubble screens back in the day, teams might know it's coming, but Mike would still get you 8 yards because you couldn't tackle him. You throw that to Marquise Lee. Marquise Lee isn't getting stopped behind the line of scrimmage one-on-one. It's not happening. It's just not going to happen. USC's wide receivers couldn't make anybody miss. And really it became shocking when Zachariah Branch was getting those passes, and he would most of the time. The secondary did not respect USC going over the top on those plays, and they were flying at Zach instantaneously. And number two, even when Zach had a couple of yards to make a move and make somebody miss, which is what you expect him to be able to do, he couldn't do it. It happened in the Notre Dame game too. He just couldn't do it. So if you don't block those particularly well, if everybody knows they're coming and doesn't worry about you, faking that and throwing over the top, which they almost never did. And if your wide receivers aren't good enough runners that they can just make a play on that one-on-one, then you get in a position where that whole part of your offense is just disastrous. And it was bad all year. It's such an important part of what Lincoln Riley does that we kept going to it, but it almost never worked. It was just awful. And they have to get substantially better at that. I know it's a big part of Riley's scheme, but I mean, how many second and 12s and second and 13s can you get running those plays over and over again? And sometimes with the tight end, which always stunned me because the one guy I know on that team is not going to make somebody miss and make a big play out of that is Lake McCree. He's a good football player. I'm not criticizing Lake. That ain't what he does. So, I mean, it's one thing if you throw it to Mekhi Lemon and the guy makes a great tackle one-on-one, you say, okay, I get it. But the insistence on doing that over and over again to the tight ends just to watch them go nowhere every single time was pretty extraordinary. I mean, you got to have a high level of stubbornness to continue to do that for 12 games. Okay, let's talk about the defense, which, for most of the year was a bright spot. They made some plays against Notre Dame. It's hard to say that the defense was a bright spot. One thing that Notre Dame did to us Saturday that I thought was kind is they also got away from the running game more than they needed to. I mean, Notre Dame ran the ball more than 60% of the time. But I remember multiple times where Notre Dame has like a 2nd and 8 and they decide to throw the ball. And the first thing I thought was thank you. Because I don't believe that USC can stop that running game if you run it 90% of the time. And Lou Holtz would have. Under those circumstances, Lou Holtz would have run the ball 50 times in that game, and it would have been absolutely demoralizing. And USC wouldn't have gotten the pick on the I guess it was a pick. I don't know if they call it a pick or a fumble, the one that shot up in the air. You don't get those plays if you just run the ball over and over again. With Ricky Waters and Jerome Bettis would have just kept running it. Notre Dame got away from it a little bit and gave the defense a chance, because I don't think USC's defense had an answer for that running game at all. Am I off base on that?
No, not at all. You have to consider that a fumble because it was Jacoby Covington caught the guy from behind, and it was textbook punch out from the back. So it was definitely a fumble. Look, USC's defense, I don't think any of us are going to disagree, surprised us all. We knew they were going to be better than last year because you couldn't be worse than last year. But the steps they took, they were the reason USC was in every single game this year. And yeah, they gave up some plays on occasion. Like you said, Lou Holtz would have ran the ball 90% of the time. That's what Michigan did. And eventually they popped one at the end of the game when it mattered. But if this team had more depth, it's kind of makes you wonder what could have been, because you lost who might have been your three best players going into the season on that side of the ball. Eric Gentry, he makes plays. Anthony Lucas really started to show why he was that 5-star coming out of high school and why everybody was so high on him. And what we heard was supposed to happen the year before. He made all those plays in practice, but now you had him in a good scheme and you saw it actually showing up on the field. And who knows how good USC's defensive line could be if Bear Alexander didn't feel like quitting early in the season. So you saw them get better as the season went along, specifically at both defensive end spots. Those last 3-4 games of the year, you're starting Sam Green and Cameron Fountain. You started to see the production pick up. You just didn't have the depth. You didn't have enough good players who, the players like a Sam Green or a Cameron Fountain, who you're anticipating getting better as they go along. It was just a kind of a potpourri on defense. You brought in good players. Kamari Ramsey, solid. Really put this defense together. Achille Arnold, Easton Mascarenas Arnold. I think, Eric, one of you mentioned John Humphrey with the interception. Probably the easiest one he's going to have, but he made it he took a really weird route returning it. So it's, even when they made plays, they didn't make the right play on the play. It was just good defense, could have been better, but I have zero complaints with what they did. It's just kind of what could have been if they were healthier. Jalen Smith taking that next step to, I don't know if he's going to be an All-American, but he got the Senior Bowl invite to the Reese's game. A lot of good stuff showed up when D'Anton Lynn showed up and this defensive staff showed up. So big picture going forward, keep the staff together. It looks like they're recruiting better. I think the future is bright with this defense.
Yeah, we may get into a little bit of recruiting preview in a little bit. Eric, tell me if you agree. This was a workmanlike defense where you had guys that brought their lunch pail and played hard, and where you got the most of the talent, right? They squeezed the most you could get out of Nate Clift and Gavin Meyer. They squeezed the most you could get out of Jalen Smith, who went from being a guy who most weeks last year was a liability to being maybe their most consistent defender. So I think they squeezed every drop of juice they could have out of those guys. The problem is the most of the upperclassmen are not, right? These are not first or second day NFL picks. And then the young guys just haven't had a chance to develop. That's sort of my take on it. You in the same place?
Yeah, I mean, this defense is 70th in the country in total yards allowed, right? Total defense. That's not good. It's not good. It's crazy that we're talking about it like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This was a fun defense to watch based on what we've seen, and I think that's your point. That's what you're saying. There were few plays this year, and felt like none compared to the last couple of years, where you just thought, what are they doing? What was even the point of anything anyone was trying to do on that play? None of it. And so when it feels like the defense is just in a solid position and organized correctly, and nothing is just like completely blown out the secondary and guys are off all the time, but you're still not sort of tilting the line of scrimmage, your way and constantly playing in their backfield and just pushing guys around. That's what you're speaking to. It's the concepts are good. The guys got it. They're for the most part in the right places. Now you need sort of the personnel to just be able to shove guys around and win one-on-one matchups and blow stuff up at the line. And early on against LSU, and who knew what LSU team was showing up week to week, and we found that out about them kind of as we went along. But early on against LSU, they really did, that whole, showed up to a fist fight and punched and won, I think, more at the line of scrimmage. They didn't not win at the line of scrimmage every week, but it got harder and harder as guys got hurt and you started to see some wear and tear. I mean, Gavin Meyer by the end of the year looked like the Michelin Man. I mean, hit both of his arms had like 40 pounds of tape on them. Like guys played through some stuff this year. I think you saw a little bit of the depth. You're still asking for like a lot from Devin Tompkins, who, Dan Lynn sort of pointed to as that guy played a lot better than I thought he would when I first showed up. So you're getting that sort of elevated play from guys. You're not ending this year looking at the defense and going, that's a first round pick, that's a first round, that's a late second, that's an early second, right? You're not littered with that kind of talent. But what you said is absolutely right. I think 95% of the guys on defense, if you sat down at the beginning of the year and talked about what you thought maybe to expect from them, they played better than that on the field. The stats don't really back it up because you're not making those impactful plays. It's not corners sticking with guys and getting their hands in the way and intercepting passes. It's not edge guys or even tackles beating linemen one-on-one and getting to the quarterback. You just were you were enough of a wall that the defense had to really struggle to push you down the field. And you have 6 losses because you didn't have the explosive offense that was taking advantage of every time they got the ball with a chance to either stretch the lead or win the game.
Yeah, what you don't have on the USC defense is anybody at this point that offensive coordinators look at and say, I don't know how we handled that guy, right? We have a matchup problem there. You just don't have that. We thought Bear Alexander might give USC that. He certainly had the talent to give USC that, but we know what happened with him. And with him out, you really don't. Some of the young guys who I think will be very good, I think Cameron Fountain's going to be a very good player. He's a freshman. He's not. No offense coordinators looking at Cameron Fountain saying, I don't know what we're going to do with that guy. And USC didn't have anybody like that. They had a lot of guys. They had a lot of guys who would do their jobs, which is more we could say than we could say the last 3 years, right? I mean, the last 3 years you didn't have anybody doing any jobs. It was just almost every possession was just a nightmare. Nobody keeping contained. Sometimes by alignment, you knew you couldn't keep contained, right? You got away from that this year. There were very few times I looked at the field and said, "Oh no, we can't stop an outside running play to the left." I said that all the time last year. Like virtually every play against Arizona and Washington, I just looked at the alignment and said, "Oh, we're screwed. All they have to do is run that toss sweep again. It'll be 15 yards." And it was over and over and over again. So yeah, it wasn't a great defense, but at least they would do that. Like they would line up right. They had a scheme that made sense. You wouldn't have guys running wide open in the secondary all the time. I mean, it's people who haven't been following USC might be wondering why we're talking about a defense that gave up. I think probably they'll finish around 24 points per game and below average in yards per game, like it's a heroic unit. Well, compared to what we've seen, it is a heroic unit. I mean, it was just unbelievably horrible the last 3 years, just unimaginably bad. So if you have some guys who aren't all that talented, but if they have the B gap, they'll be in the B gap. That's a really nice thing. It makes you feel good inside just to see that. So USC needs to get a lot better defensively, a lot better. USC's linebacker play against Notre Dame was bad. It wasn't very good most weeks, frankly. USC's inability to get off blocks, their inability to penetrate into the backfield, their inability to put pressure on the quarterback, these are all problems that have to be solved by having the sorts of athletes that Georgia and Ohio State and other programs have, right? They have to recruit better to do that. But at least having guys who would do their jobs most of the time was such a welcome relief that most weeks I was thrilled to watch it. Mark, you're going to say something.
I was just going to say, we can't take it back. We all said at the beginning of the season, if Lincoln Riley has a defense, we're going to have a really good season. And the fact that you look at how many yards they gave up per game, but you compare that to how many points they gave up per game, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's not a defense that would shut people down and get you good field position.
But they kept them in every game. They weren't the reason they lost this year.
We're on the same page. It's a defense that didn't give up a bunch of points. So if your offense is playing well, you should win.
But it's a regular Lincoln Riley offense, scoring an average, regular Lincoln Riley scoring point average.
Yes. And part of the reason that both quarterbacks have had such a difficult time for the fan base this year is that everybody knows that if you put Caleb Williams on this year's team, that team wins at least 10 games, right? Maybe all 12. Maybe all 12. Now, that's not really fair to the quarterbacks because not everybody can be Caleb Williams. There's only one out there, right? But that's the truth. And so part of the thing I'm trying to figure out now is whether all of our talk about how Lincoln Riley's going to put up 38, 40, 42 points. So if you can just play reasonable defense, you're all right. Maybe, but maybe that depends on him having a number 1 overall pick at quarterback for his offense to look like that. And if it does, I don't know how sustainable that is, because even though he's had an extraordinary run with quarterbacks, he had 2 guys this year who were both above average and actually pretty decent. I would say both of them are pretty decent.
Big Ten quarterbacks. Yeah. You got Big Ten quarterback play from your quarterbacks just fine. Yeah. Big Ten quarterback play. That's what college football fans have been watching. USC fans have been spoiled by quarterback play for forever. Forever, yeah. They've been spoiled by quarterback play. That's what college football quarterbacking looks like for 95% of teams. And so, yeah, you're right. Can you only run an offense if you've got the best guy out there? We didn't think so, but that's what this one felt like.
I mean, I could get a team to score 32 points a game with Caleb Williams, right? Because Caleb's just going to do whatever Caleb does. He's going to run around. He's going to make extraordinary plays, and so I guess where we went wrong was we assumed that Lincoln Riley would take Miller Moss or wherever he had a quarterback, would coach him up, would scheme him up, and all of a sudden they'd be putting up 39, 40 points. It turns out that's not true. At least it wasn't true this year. And the big question going forward is, was it not true this year because you had wide receivers who were underperforming and maybe undercoached, and you had a young offensive line and guys playing out of position on the offensive line? Or is it just that Lincoln Riley has made his reputation because he's had Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, and Baker Mayfield, all of whom are legitimate NFL quarterbacks and good ones? Well, I mean, I don't know. A lot of offensive quarters may score a lot of points with guys like that at quarterback.
Look, you can take the Alex Grinch away from Lincoln Riley, but you can't take the Alex Grinch philosophy out of Lincoln Riley. He constantly went back to trying to put that square peg through a round hole. You were talking about it right there. Use who you have to the best of their abilities. If you've got a strong running game, use the running game. Help your quarterbacks out. I mean, the reason why everybody said it's time to put in Jaden Mayava, you weren't pass protecting great. You weren't giving your quarterback enough time to go through his progressions downfield. You needed somebody more elusive, somebody who could use their legs. You didn't do that when you inserted them. you're
Well,
not.
and you weren't, and Miller Moss wasn't any threat in the run game, right? That was part of the problem, is that the backside edge knows he's not going to keep it. I'm not sure they actually fixed that problem with Mayav in there either. He kept it a couple of times, but he was not a running threat, and he was not a designed running threat, and that means you took away one of the things that could have made the offense better, and I'm not sure why.
So okay, change your game plan. You have to use the pieces you have to the best of their abilities. Stop trying to make your system work just because you think your system is better than everybody else's. It's not.
Well,
The thing he also had at Oklahoma, he had an offensive line factory, right? That group was good every single year. And so is that the gap, right? Is that the only gap you need to fill? I think again, the offensive line got better as it went along. I don't think anybody thought in any game against anybody, did we go in saying, well, USC's got the clear advantage on the offensive line compared to the other team's defensive line. Like they didn't play, not every defensive line did they go against. Was it great? And
Right.
not every game was it sort of very slanted towards the opponent's defensive line, but you did go into every game thinking, how are we going to help the offensive line? How many pieces do I need to use to make sure that we're okay up front in this game?
that's right. And if you're very good up front offensively, there are all kinds of offensive schemes that are going to work really, really well, right? And USC was not. They got better, but even at the end, you didn't look at that offensive line and say, they're going to get after people today. You looked at them and said, I think we'll run the ball okay. Hopefully, we won't have too many missed blocks off the edge. Um, and here's where fans who were critical of Lincoln Riley, I think, missed something, and that is that USC was in a tough spot in terms of their O line when he got here. Yes, he had an experienced O line that first year that played pretty well. He had almost nothing behind it. And in the world of big NIL payments to elite offensive linemen, USC was not in a position to compete. I think that's changing, but they were not in a position to compete. And would the offensive line have looked different if they landed guys like Francis Mauigoa? Probably would have. But if you can't offer any money and other people are offering lots of money, you're not going to get those guys. So part of the problem with the recruiting on the offensive line was just that USC inherited very little from Clay Helton, who was a disaster, and USC didn't have the money to go out and get elite guys. So it got guys who are big guys who you think you can develop over the course of years and threw them out way too early.
Very
But that's
little
what
is
happened.
actually giving too much praise to what they. I mean, they got you had Jonah
Yeah.
Monheim.
Yeah, yeah. You got one guy. You got one guy in those two classes. I mean, and the Michigan under Harbaugh didn't recruit exceptionally well. They were sort of where Lincoln Riley's been the last couple of years in terms of recruiting rankings. But what they did is they had big guys and they were in the program for a while and they developed them, and you need that with offensive line. In fact, maybe this is a good time to give a little bit of a preview. Only a preview. We're not going to tell you the breaking news on recruiting because it'll change in 17 minutes. So we'll do a recruiting show on Friday after signing day, and we can run through this. But one of the criticisms people have had is that Lincoln Riley hasn't built the USC program from the inside out. He's got, brings in Caleb Williams, he brings in Jordan Addison, he's got some good running backs, all this stuff. My impression is that that's changing a little bit this year on the recruiting trail. Maybe that's not fair. I think it probably changed last year on the recruiting trail. But in any event, maybe a little bit of a preview, Eric, in terms of what we're looking at potentially with this recruiting class and where we look like we may be strong. Because I think it may be strong in the places we need to be strong.
So what I really liked about this staff is that they, every staff, oh, we don't look at rankings, we don't. All right. But what I will give them credit for, they really do go find guys. They go find guys that they like and that can really play. And we've seen that. James Johnson for me is a guy that sort of jumps out as a guy who could, I don't know, play 12 spots for you. I think probably a defensive back, but again, a 3-star guy, like 1,000 overall. Now, saying that, you don't want to be talking about the bottom of your class. You need to talk about the top of your class. And we talked about that with this team. You didn't have enough elite guys to put you over the top and just kind of win games on their own. And I think where you're seeing some of the best players added potentially, because again, it's 10 seconds later after, that you're watching this after I'm saying it. But on the offensive lines and defensive lines. And Lincoln Riley sort of took a pass in that 2022 class there. The 2023 class and 4 really is sort of a reflection of, we want to put a ton of effort in on both these lines. We're a little bit handcuffed in terms of being able to go spend money however much we want. We need guys that really love it and want to buy in and can still be recruited a little bit the old-fashioned way, where you like the coach and the school and the things that you're actually going to spend your life doing while you're there. That's a little bit past now. And when you see people crediting coaches for this unbelievable recruiting close and whatever, it's like, I don't know how much that guy had to do with it. But in this class, I think we're starting to see a little bit that Lincoln Riley can go out and punch a little bit with some of the spenders in NIL. And when you combine kind of what he's selling on building, which again, a 6-6 record is not going to be immediately off-putting to recruits that like a lot of the other stuff and can see, hey, where can we go? But you're going to end up flipping 2 pretty good offensive tackles, 4-star guys, and Alex Payne and Aaron Dunn. Alex Payne from North Carolina, Aaron Dunn, who was committed to Utah. And again, we've said for years, I know that Utah program wasn't this year what it's been, but you get me a guy that Utah wanted on the offensive line, sounds good. I'll take 5 of those guys in every class. So you're building there. You've got some kind of intriguing interior guys, but the defensive line and front 7 especially is where I think you can really start to see this program taking significant steps forward. And that was in this last class. You mentioned Cam Fountain. We saw Jade Abasiri. Carlon Jones is a guy we didn't see all year as he sort of battled some injury stuff, but he was like the big name right at the end there that USC got, some linebackers that we saw flashes from. And so there's 2 guys that are still out there right now, potential signing day guys, but Jakeem Stewart, a defensive lineman that USC sort of just dove all in for to pull away from LSU, not let him go to Ohio State, not let him go to Oregon. Again, we're going to see what happens. And I think signing days now are like minute to minute based on who's calling and who's offering what and all that sort of stuff. But going in, I don't think you can fault USC for sort of how they've positioned themselves and how they've gone after him. If you land him and then a much more local guy again in your front 7 and linebacker for Madden Faramo, that's 2 big pieces to close the class at 2 positions that you absolutely need to start adding to. And so when you can see the effort, at those spots, offensive line, defensive, I guess front 7 sort of overall. And there's other guys in here, but you're starting to sort of stack classes and build. And now you got to hang on to them, right? We're in the transfer portal too, and you're going to see surprises leave and coaches pulling their hair out. And how do you deal with this stuff now? But the effort is there. I think the results are going to be there in this one. And again, it's not a top 3 class. It's not a top 5 class, which you still need to move towards and get to. But I think there's going to be, for the first time, maybe in a while, some signing day stuff that feels like, okay, this is something that really got put together. There's some guys here.
Yeah, you can pull quarterbacks and running backs out of the transfer portal pretty easily, actually. USC's done a really good job of getting transfer portal running backs, and Caleb Williams is a pretty decent transfer portal quarterback. Oregon pulls quarterbacks out of the portal. Notre Dame does. Ohio State does. I'm less concerned about those positions when it comes to high school recruiting. I'm thrilled that Houston Longstreet's coming to USC. He looks like a talented kid. But I'm less concerned about that than I am about the trenches. You cannot pull a defensive line out of the transfer portal. It's very, very difficult. And if you do it, it's extraordinarily expensive. Yeah. So you have those are places where you have to go and get big bodies who are going to develop into a great unit. If USC lands who I think they're going to land in their front seven this year, I think you look at the combined classes last year and this year, and you say USC should have a championship level defensive front. And that's and the big thing was that usually in Southern California, those are the positions that are hard to get, right? You're going to find quarterbacks in SoCal. That's easy. You'll find defensive backs, you'll find wide receivers if you want them. That's easy. But getting the big defensive linemen, and so they've gone out and they've gotten some guys, and I think they have a couple more that are going to commit. And you're looking at it saying that's a group that you could put on the field against Ohio State in 2 or 3 years and feel very good that you match up with them. That's what they had to do. So the recruiting rankings do matter to me, but what matters most is that you have to get the positions that you can't build through the transfer portal, and that's offensive and defensive line. And I think they're doing a much better job this year and last year than USC has in the past. They also do a good job of finding guys. Look, Sam Green he was a 3-star that was largely overlooked, but you watch his film and you thought, I think that guy's actually going to be pretty good. I think he is going to be pretty good. As a redshirt freshman, he's playing pretty well. In 2 years, Sam Green is going to be a guy who can vie for all conference honors. He's going to be that level of player. Elijah Hughes, nobody was interested in Elijah Hughes. Elijah Hughes is going to be at least a very solid depth piece in the interior of the defensive line for the next 2 years. So they've done a good job of finding those guys. Now they need to be able to land the guys like Jakeem Stewart, who are future top 15 picks. A defense has to have a guy like that or a couple guys like that to be a great defense. So USC knows that. They've apparently gone all in on that recruiting and have decided to write a very large check. So hopefully that will hold. Mark, any other thoughts on this preview? Obviously, we'll talk more about recruiting when the guys actually sign.
Yeah, Eric, you brought up I love the analogy about, going out there and picking the fights. You don't have to pick a fight with the biggest person every fight. You mentioned Aaron Dunn and Alex Payne. Those, South Carolina and Utah, those aren't big NIL schools, but you went after and recruiting isn't recruiting anymore. It's more about bidding, if we're being honest with each other here. You kind of outbid those programs to get those players. And I'm sure USC has other features that attracted those guys. But, let's not be naive here. When you're recruiting some of the best players at their positions, regardless of the school they're going to, you just have to make sure you're making your package the most attractive. And that brings me to the defensive side of the ball. USC went all in. I won't say went all in, but they threw their hat in the ring for Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson and Elijah Griffin, as well as Jakeem Stewart. You're not going to get all of them because you can't afford to get all of them. But if you get 1 out of every 4 that you're going to go fight the big guys for, is that an acceptable ratio as long as you're filling in with the other quality pieces that don't cost, $1 million to $2 million per player at those key positions? So as long as USC and the House of Victory, they keep that thing pointing in the right direction, USC keeps this defensive staff, I think things are going in the right direction. It's taken USC a little bit longer to kind of get that momentum going with recruiting, whatever the reasons are. But yeah, where the recruiting ranking technically matters, you need to make sure you're getting the right pieces for that class at that time. And USC needs, guys who can play offensive tackle. They need guys who can be an impact player at defense. If they close with Jakeem Stewart, Madden Faremo, and you got another, borderline 3-star, 4-star defensive lineman, Christian Ingram, I'm willing to take those 3 and trade in a 5-star Jerome Miles if I can close with that. Again, it's more about needs versus, hey, we got the top 5 recruiting class. Give me what I need, not what I want.
Yeah, and USC is going to have to go to the transfer portal this year. We know that. They're already losing some depth pieces on the offensive line. Two guys have already announced that they're going to go to the transfer portal. USC is going to have to spend some of that money in the portal, and they're going to have to spend some of that money in the portal on offensive linemen, which isn't ideal, but they're going to have to do it. And so this will again be another eventful transfer portal offseason for USC but I guess it's becoming every team I guess has an exciting transfer portal offseason these days. You can't really avoid it.
Well, hopefully we're getting to the point now where that we're going to be less reliant on the transfer portal. Two things stood out. Eric, pointed this out. There, you had 26 Trojans do the senior walk against Notre Dame. 18 were through the transfer portal. You want to get position group specific. This is the time where you say no more running backs through the transfer portal. Let's go with who we recruited and who's coming in. It gets to a point where you have to start balancing that roster a little bit better.
Yeah, you don't want to have to pull your starting running back out of the portal every year. Although I'll say this, if there's a guy who is a truly elite talent, you probably take him. Even though I like USC's running backs, so you probably take him. And certainly a wide receiver, because these are positions that are easy to plug somebody in. It's harder to plug USC is going to have to do it, but it's harder to plug somebody in at offensive line out of the portal than it is at wide receiver. It's easy to take a wide. I could take a wide receiver off Ohio State's roster, have them play in USC's bowl game, and they'd be just fine. It's easy to plug in wideouts. It's easy to plug in running backs. It's easy to plug in quarterbacks. But you can't build a solid offensive line through the transfer portal. You've got to get the young kids and develop them.
USC's best transfer portal player that played on the line, arguably, is Emmanuel Prayone, and he wasn't a one-year mercenary. He actually developed with Josh Henson at USC.
Yeah, it turned into a very good player too, who's probably going to have a good NFL future.
Yep.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about recruiting on Friday. Guys, anything else we want to cover here? Probably not Notre Dame related, but you can if you want. Maybe big picture into the season, how we should be. Maybe final thoughts on how USC fans should be looking at the USC program right now.
Yeah, I had said that this felt more like, because of the defensive changes, this felt more like a coach's first year at USC, right? This was Lincoln Riley's first year. Now you build, now you go forward. But there's not a lot because of the offense, because of the situation at quarterback, because there's real sort of offensive line instability now with when you look at who you're losing and any type of sort of experienced players behind them. There's not as much sort of comfort in looking forward when you're saying, oh, okay, erase the first two. Here's the start of the rebuild. This is what the first year looks like. And now going forward, there are still a lot more questions, I think, about this. And maybe that's just kind of the state of college football right now. You never know what next year's roster is going to look like. Like you could look down the 24 roster and go and we do this. Who's got eligibility left? Who's set to come back? And I've done it the last couple of years, and then you look back at it in the spring and you go, none of those guys are here. They all left, and there's all this sort of change. So I think that I think what we're gonna have to just sort of rely on is what happens with the coaching staff. Do you make changes? It's very rare that you go year to year and lose nobody. USC's got some defensive guys that are going to be targets, and they've, for the most part have been here 1 year. How often do you guys want to, plant somewhere, then get up and go somewhere else? So maybe what they're building and all of that helps them stick. But I think that's big, to keep at least as many of those guys and Danton Lynn's kind of whole scheme and building and philosophy and all of that in place. Offensively, I think you've got to see what you need. I think Lincoln Riley really needs a foundational look at what they're doing offensively. And I don't necessarily mean you got to get rid of everybody and change everything and bring in all new looks or whatever, but you really have to be honest with what can we do? What is this team that we're going to have? How can we find success? And I think maybe bigger than that, how do you play in the Big Ten? Like, what is the Big Ten giving you where you have to be able to find that? And with a defense that looks the way it does, yeah, he's not got a ton of experience playing opposite a defense like that. And coaches talk all the time about complementary football. If you're kind of out this way and your defense is out this way and it's tugging, we saw that a lot this year where there were very few times where both sides of the ball were just absolutely in sync, making plays, doing all that stuff. And sometimes you just have to have one side of the ball, kind of help out a lot more. So offensively, are you playing in a way that helps your defense? And then the last thing is the transfer portal. How how big of a player can you be in that for really, really key difference maker guys? Gavin Meyer came over last year and it was like, well, at least they got a body. And he played well, but it's like what we talked about. He played well. He's not going to be in the discussion as a, all Big Ten guy or a top, 2-day NFL pick. If there are those guys out there, I think you really need to get some difference makers in there and be that kind of program. Are you that kind of program that can go out and put a roster together right now to just impose your will on teams? The Big Ten is good. The top of the Big Ten is good. There was no reason this year that USC couldn't be, and we said it coming in. We thought Michigan would be, maybe better, not as bad, but the top of the Big Ten has always been that, right? Ohio State, Michigan battling at the top. Penn State's there at number 3. USC had to assert themselves right there. Penn State level, fighting for that number 3, number 4 at worst, and it didn't happen. You can get there in 1 year. You got to go do it.
USC has shown that they can be that number 3 in their first year. They played with Michigan. They played toe-to-toe with Penn State. As far as going forward, this team, I disagree with you, Eric. I think they're closer. We saw how close they were this year. If you're going to hit the transfer portal, you got to do it smartly. You got to go get that 1 or 2 pieces you need on each side of the ball. And then Lincoln Riley, I think, is trying to learn a new language right now. He moved to France. He moved to the Big Ten Conference. He's learning how to speak Big Ten football. And I know it sounds like I'm probably beating a dead horse with it. But I think for Lincoln Riley to grow as a head coach, you need to get a different voice inside your head on that side of the ball. Someone who can say, hey, you know what? Let's talk a little bit more about the running game philosophy and how we can incorporate that into your offensive scheme. That's where this team is right now. They're one step away from having the right pieces, going from good to great. They were there this year had they just leaned into those areas that they were better than other areas on the team. Why did they lose to Penn State? Why did they lose to Michigan? Maybe you're right. Maybe they are one play away here and there. But when those one play away adds up, you're more than that. So it comes back to a philosophy. Where do things need to be tuned up under the hood, as Urban Meyer might, kind of talk about?
If you don't go get impact guys in the portal, like a number of them, you're going into next year rolling the dice almost everywhere. Almost everywhere.
You're in year 4.
Entire secondary, right? The entire secondary who played, especially if Kamari Ramsey goes to the NFL, you know nothing about those guys behind them. Or is there some talent in there? Do you hope that those guys can play? Yeah, I think Braylon Collins is going to be good. I think Marcellus Williams is going to be good. I think if you put Zion Branch on the field, I think he can be good. I think all those things. You haven't seen it. At linebacker, you lose the 2 guys that played any number of significant snaps. Again, if Eric Gentry does come back and is healthy, feel good about that. Do I think Desmond Stevens is good? Probably. Do I know it? No, not really. Defensive line, you're going to rely on guys that showed flashes this year, but still no one that comes back where you say that guy's done it and he's going to be great this year. And offense, it's the same thing. I think Quentin Joyner could probably handle an entire season's worth of work. He almost fumbled again against Notre Dame, and that's been kind of an issue, pass protection and fumbling. Do I think the young wide receivers will take a step forward? I'd bet on it. I'd bet on it, but I don't know. Are there answers on the offensive line? It's all young. It's all young and experienced. I think Elijah Page probably is that guy. I think Alani Noah probably gets better. I don't know if I don't think they have a center. I don't know if they have a replacement at left guard. Is Jaden Mayava the answer at quarterback? Maybe, maybe. I think he could be. There's just so many. You lose so many veteran, experienced guys that if you don't go get players who can play, it's a dice roll almost anywhere. If we trust the development, we trust the guys we brought in, we're going to put them on the field. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it, but there are not a ton of guys where you say that guy has had an unbelievable year this past year. He's coming back. He's going to do the same thing again next year.
USC does not have a championship roster right now, and it's not close. They played close to some teams that may go deep into the playoffs, but you look at the top 4 playoff teams, whoever those top 4 are, whatever 4 teams make it to the semifinals, and you compare the NFL prospects on those rosters to the NFL prospects on USC's roster, and you're going to see a gigantic gap in talent. That's the truth.
But USC was recruited, and how much of that talent was imported? That's where the breakdown comes in.
Look, I mean, it's both, right? I mean, Ohio State and Oregon are both playing with transfer quarterbacks. Notre Dame's playing the transfer quarterback. Georgia and Alabama bring in guys every year from the portal.
How many is the question? That was really where I'm trying to specify it.
Well, but my point is this. My point is not that you can go into the portal and bring in a whole new team. I don't think that works. But what I am saying is USC is not close to being an elite program right now. And it's not just because Lincoln Riley doesn't run the ball enough. Lincoln Riley doesn't run the ball enough. USC, there are things that USC should have done where they should not be 6-6. They probably should be 8-4 with the team they have right now. But it's not an 11-win team. They don't have 11-win talent on this roster. USC has to massively upgrade their talent. And the people who are talking about Lincoln Riley's coaching failures and the offensive staff's coaching failures, I think they have real arguments and pretty good arguments. And I agree with all that. But here's what I know. When Lincoln Riley has a talented offense, it scores a bunch of points. It does, right? We've seen it over and over again. Larry Coker won a national title and obliterated everybody in his path, not because Larry Coker was a brilliant tactician. It's because he had an incredible roster. Oregon is the #1 team in the country, not because Dan Lanning is an amazing head coach. Dan Lanning's not a guy who you go and move him over to Minnesota, and Minnesota goes from 8 wins to 11. That's not who he is. Dan Lanning's a really good recruiter on a staff with really good recruiters, and they have a giant bag of cash to hand out, and they're undefeated. The reason they're undefeated is because they have a better roster than USC does. USC has to dramatically upgrade their roster. They couldn't do that before because they weren't in a position to compete with the NIL. If they're in a position to compete with the NIL in the NIL realm now, you're going to see them improve the roster. But USC will not be winning the Big Ten until they have a whole lot of future NFL draft choices on their roster. That's the truth. They either do that, and if they do that, they'll win. Lincoln Riley may or may not be a good enough coach to win the playoff, even with a good roster. I don't know that yet. But I know that Lincoln Riley will get his team into the playoff and will win some big games and will compete for conference championships if he has a championship level roster. So they're going to have to finish strong recruiting this year. They're going to have to finish strong in high school recruiting next year, and they're going to have to get some elite guys out of the transfer portal, because if they do that, they'll be good next year. If they don't do that, they won't be. I really think it's that simple. All right, well, we'll talk about recruiting more on Friday. Hopefully the staff closes strong. I think they're going to, and I think it's going to be a good Wednesday signing day. But it's 24 hours before that, and these days 24 hours in recruiting is like 24 years in the medieval world. almost everything can change in that amount of time. All right, guys, I guess that's it. We'll see you Friday. Hopefully we're talking about some recruiting successes. Until then, fight on, everybody.